All right, everyone. So in this video, I just kind of want to walk you over the DAT1 website. I have the one select option, and that'll be very important as we move forward because it contains the market conditions tool and the tri-haul tool. So if you are a new dispatcher, I recommend that that is the option that you select. Again, you can get a 10% discount by using the link in the bio or the link in the description of this video. So just kind of looks like this. Let's get familiarized with kind of the website. So just off the bat, when you log in, you should have access to the dashboard. And the dashboard has three options. It has the post a truck option, the search loads option, and the search trucks option. Post a truck option is typically used when you've already kind of attempted to find freight in an area but are having trouble finding kind of the load. It can also be used if, for example, you know you'll be arriving in a certain area at a certain time. You can post your truck ahead of time. Search loads is typically the button that we will be kind of, or the feature that we will be using the most. That is where we will find loads, call on them, and kind of go from there. So search trucks option is typically reserved for freight brokers, since they are typically the ones that will be looking for trucks to kind of fulfill their capacity. And then on the right, you should have the national loads count, which will have kind of the loads available in whatever city or state you're in. So this is kind of maybe not the most accurate right now since it is 3:30 p.m. Typically, loads are posted from 8 a.m. to noon. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see these options as well, the search loads option, the search trucks option. Then you'll see two more options. One is the my trucks option. That will kind of allow you to keep track of the trucks that you have available on your side. And then the my loads option, which will show kind of the options that you mark as called on or working or booked. So that should also help you. And then finally, you should have access to the tools section. Sorry, we're going to skip the private network and private loads section as we won't be going over them in this video. So the quick rate lookup and the market conditions tools are the two main tools that we will be using. Quick rate lookup will allow you to get an idea of what the spot market looks like. So spot market means, for example, loads that the freight brokers will quote out to shippers will typically use a spot market rate. And so you'll be able to kind of see what the going rate is for that as well. And then you'll have an option here to use the market conditions on that DAT1 select option. And the market conditions will allow you to see kind of which markets, which cities, which states have the best paid freight for your truck type. So we definitely need that. And of course, the tri-haul tool we will be using as well. That will be over on the search loads option. So the rest of these tools we will not be using, but you can kind of play around here and kind of see what other options are on your own time. So I will see you in the next video.
If you're looking for an ELD and you're suffering through decision paralysis, we've got you. First ELD is our chosen partner, and their ELD is not only contractless, but easily integrates with Highway, Project 44, Trucker Tools, and MacroPoint. If you're interested in getting more information, click the link tree in the bio and select the first ELD option to get started.
All right, everyone. So from this window, that dashboard, which is the kind of home screen, I'm going to go ahead and select either the search load button or the search loads button to begin kind of going through, kind of showing you all kind of what the load board would look like. So I'm going to select the search loads button from the menu button. You can select the search load button from the dashboard kind of home menu. So right at the very top, we have kind of these files. So as you can kind of see here, you have new search. And so if you have the DAT1 select plan, you should be able to add up to 10. I'm going to close them all out now. I was just trying to show you all. So you should be able to search for up to 10 trucks, right? Maybe more if they're not, if some are in the same city and have the same equipment. So right off the bat, we have origin, right? So for the sake of kind of just going through this with you all, I'm going to start off with Kansas City. which is where my home place is. And that is basically saying I'm starting off. I want to pick the load up in Kansas City, Missouri. That is my origin. DHO to the right of that is deadhead origin. So D dead H head dash origin, deadhead origin. If you'll remember, deadhead is when you are driving somewhere with empty miles, right? So in this case, I am saying I'm willing to pick up, if I'm located in Kansas City, Missouri, I'm willing to drive outside up to a radius of 150 miles. So whether that be 24 miles out to like Overland Park, or 100 miles out to um, Neosho. I'm not actually sure that's how far that is, but kind of like an example. So you would select that there. Destination can actually be left empty. And then, of course, deadhead destination will default to 150, but this can be left empty. And of course, deadhead over on the origin can be adjusted 50, 30, 80. I'll do 70 for now. And then this little swap button will allow you to, like, for example, if I knew a lane or if I saw a load that I liked, let's say it was Kansas City to Houston, and I kind of wanted to check and see what Houston to Kansas City, Missouri looked like, I would be able to do so by just swapping that there. So for now, I'm leaving destination empty. Over here on equipment type, I will be searching for a refrigerated box truck. And so, as you can kind of tell, there's a long list. You are able to select multiple options. The only detail here is sometimes you do have to play with it. So, for example, I have a refrigerated 26-foot box truck. I am going to do I'm going to try to do reefer and box truck. You can tell it's not letting me. There's no option pulling up. But if I were to start off with straight box truck first and then reefer, then I'm able to kind of search for both of them at once. So both equipment types. Load type, we have full and full partial from the drop menu. Um, Very important detail here is full can mean a variety of things depending on the truck. So for a straight box truck, full is typically like a load that weighs 8,000, 10,000, 9,000 pounds, or takes up the full length of the truck. Partial would be like halfway or like a quarter of the way. Now that's very different for, let's say, like a 53-foot dry van, right? 10,000 pounds at 26 feet would be a partial on a 53-foot dry van. Now, something to keep in mind is when brokers or freight agents or assistants post these loads, they can sometimes get confused, especially when it comes to like box truck. So I like to select full and partial. Length would be up to certain weight, so or up to a certain length. So if you have a 26-foot box truck, it'll also give you access to loads that are for 24-foot, 20-foot, 16-foot. So you can just max it out there. There's really no reason to not max it out. And then weight, same concept, up to 8,000 pounds, up to 9,000 pounds, up to 10,000 pounds. We have the date range. So date range would be, for example, February. Well, actually, I know loads, but you can actually select multiple days. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to select up until February 10th to February 12th. Now, at this very moment, it is 8:56 p.m. my time. So there are no loads really being posted, and there's definitely no freight broker reasonably working on a Monday at 8:56 p.m. So I'm going to search anyways. We just heads up, you're not going to see the full extent of of the load board, but you will probably be able to get an idea of kind of what the market looks like. So, for example, Kansas City, Missouri, I've set this deadhead of 70, and as you can kind of tell, I just got this little alarm that came up to that tab. So what does that alarm do? It alerts me when there's a new load coming in. This is super important for when maybe you're struggling to find freight, or you've called out on all the new freight or all the best paid new freight, and someone keeps grabbing that freight or calling that freight that is taking you to that origin where you want to go, and someone's already booked it. You've called maybe a second too late, or you emailed 2 minutes too late. Having that alarm will make sure that you get actual like a physical reminder. It'll be like ring, so long as your volume is up, letting you know, hey, call out on this, and it'll show up here in green saying 0 minutes. So that helps. So rate, um, will be listed here. Of course, destination, right? If you were to kind of want to go somewhere, early Idaho, right? Hit that right there. Now there's only one load available to you from Kansas City, Missouri to Burley. If you really wanted to go there, you might be like, hey, let's up this deadhead the max that it'll let me, which I think is 450, and see if anything kind of similar shows up. And as you can see, something similar does show up. Most of these have insanely bad deadheads, so probably not realistic. So I'll go ahead and delete this. I want to take it back to where we had it here with these 70 loads, Reaper box truck. So keep in mind, right now we only have 10 results that match that. We are going to swap this out. So instead of doing Kansas City, Missouri, the only thing that I'm changing is Chicago. Everything else has remained the same. And as you can tell, there's this huge difference in loads available and even the prices listed on the loads. So that's kind of like a mini example of how each market can be so different. So Kansas City, Missouri isn't really the hotbed for box truck, but kind of that Chicago area is one of those hotbeds for box truck loads. So again, age, right? We can search by age, oldest loads, newest loads. We can search by rate, being the highest load in general, right? So for example, 1500 as of right now, that is the highest paying load for this area. Of course, we are after hours. Most loads will start posting between 8 a.m. and noon, and then like noon to 5 for the ones next day. But yeah, most of these loads will come down during the night, and that's, I don't know if that's maybe just because the broker doesn't want to be called out on them, probably, because some people will call out on these. So we can also search rate per mile. Obviously, in this industry, we go by rate per mile. That determines if you're actually making money for that load. I'm going to pause it real quickly and back. I probably shouldn't have announced that. Yeah, so that kind of lets you know. And so let's click on this load. And so, for example, here we've got, and actually, I'm going to change this to the highest because I think this is where I had it. Okay. Wait, 1 sec. All right, this works. So trip will detail the entire mile that will be driven from Arlington Heights to Santa Fe, New Mexico. If I click on new route or route, it'll kind of show me what that looks like. So if I'm curious or if I want to take more load, since this is a partial load, this will kind of show me what'll be on my way from Arlington Heights to Santa Fe, New Mexico, without having to open another Google Maps page. So I can close that out, right? So as you can tell, this deadhead origin means that it is 27 miles outside of Chicago in Arlington Heights. There is no deadhead destination because I have no destination entered here, so that doesn't matter. Pickup 211. Equipment type, remember we're searching with box truck and reefer, so the R will mean reefer. And then let me click out of this. This will be for a box truck, right? So then you have additional information. So this weighs 500 pounds. It's 4 feet partial. Now, what you do want to make sure, because this is obviously not great for making money, is you do want to make sure that this isn't a dedicated run. So just because a load is listed as being partial doesn't mean that it's able to be run as not dedicated. Then you should have the brokerage information as well as the contact information. CSDTP stands for days to pay and credit score, and this is not reflective of all factoring companies. So as you all know, before you book a load, the most important thing to do is check and see if they have credit in the system with your factoring company. Just because it's on DAT and has this score does not mean it has credit with your factoring company. Now, 95% of all brokerages that have kind of this listed will, and that's just because most of this information is interchangeable with all, is kind of interchanged with all factoring companies. And that doesn't mean that it will. So do check that out. You might need to ask your freight broker or your factoring company for a broker credit check website or a broker credit check portal, where they will instruct you on how you need to check for broker credit. All right, so on this lovely load, right here, you can kind of see that it lists that 112 per mile. Great. And then when we move down here, you can see more information on on the load.
Are you interested in earning extra money by using your truck as advertisement space? Well, let me tell you about our partners, Agile Media Group. Agile Media Group is an advertising agency that uses the sides of your truck to promote businesses like T-Mobile, ShipBob, and Mountain Dew energy drinks. They're always looking for new trucking partners to join their advertising campaigns. If you're interested in getting more information, click the link tree in the bio and select the Earn Money by Advertising option to get started.
Partial reefer commodity would be exactly what is it? One pallet of cheese, weight is 500 pounds. It has contact information. So sometimes here you'd find an email address or an extension number, but this one just seems to have a direct line. And then it should have information here like kind of details. Sometimes it'll have details on pickup or details on commodity or details on extra equipment needed or who they won't work with, things like that. So for this example, we've got Arlington Heights, Illinois to Santa Fe. Over here we have rates. It just kind of breaks it down for us. And then right here we have market rates powered by DAT-IQ. Now, this confuses people. I've had people kind of think that they can call and pitch that rate at a freight broker. That's not how it works. One, for example, this is a partial load. Not all of this kind of market rate is optimized correctly for partial. For example, I have found that partial is like one of the things that kind of all data kind of struggles with. Is it's hard to say like, okay, this is a partial load or collect data on partial loads. Is it 4 feet? Is it 5 feet of space? Is it 15 feet of space? Is it taking up 20% of the trailer, 50, 60? So partial is one of those interesting ones. So you do have to be careful when you're looking at spot rate for partial. And then second, of course, is that spot rate here. This is reflective of kind of the average that the broker or the brokerage is pitching to the shipper, right? Now we need to keep in mind that the shipper has access to this as well. So shipper is usually kind of taking bids from multiple brokerages. So just because one brokerage shoots out 2,910 doesn't mean they're going to get 2,910. Now it might be what the going rate is, right? But if another brokerage hits this warehouse out with, we'll run it for 19, right? Well then, you know, they've secured it for 19 and they're of course not going to post it for that much money. Also keep in mind partial, right? If you're running refrigerated, side notes is just, of course, partials need refrigerated partials are hard just because you need to kind of be able to match temperature, right? You don't want to freeze something that shouldn't be frozen and damage a product. Now over here we have mark as. So you can mark this as saved, like, oh, I'm interested in this load. If you see it like I did tonight, I can click down here and be like, that kind of looks like something I might be interested in calling tomorrow. I can save it. Whoops, I unsaved it, undo. Click there. So now I can kind of see saved. Sometimes you'll see the book button. And so some of these brokerages will have, like Nolan, have like a broker portal. So after you onboard with them, you should be able to go in and actually search for the load and you don't have to even call a freight broker. I know Nolan is included in the online onboarding packages that I've talked about earlier. But for example, like this Aurora to Cedar Rapids, it's perfectly priced for a dry load. It is 390 pounds. I mean, this is perfectly priced. This is $2, right, for a box truck load. So I mean, that's something that I would take. You don't even negotiate at that point. I can if I were to call, I could say I mark that as called. Or if I book online right now that I'm already on board and I have a login, whatever. Yeah, I booked online. Good. My job is done. Or if you're an owner operator, your job is done. It's that easy, right? So what do we got here? Oh, and you can also submit bids on that kind of third-party website. What else do we got here? Kind of these notes. I kind of want to see if there's any notes that are okay. So some of these comments, right? So before you call a load, you do kind of want to get some of this information. You don't want to call and a call in without knowing. So, for example, this Wooddale to Tuscaloosa liftgate and pallet jack. I'm sure this broker probably has gotten a lot of calls with people who don't have a broker, who don't have a liftgate and pallet jack, and it's listed in the comments. And so that's frustrating as well. So you also don't want to waste your time kind of negotiating on something. Exactly here, like no sprinter, no cargo vans. It does say it's 8 foot, but which is sometimes people will try to look for sprinter loads using the box truck kind of search engine, and here it'll tell you no sprinters or cargo vans. It'll break down: do you need authority, first come first serve, how many pickups, how many drops. First come first serve is not appointment, right? So like first person to get to the warehouse can unload. Yep. This one has an authority, right? So this one will tell you how many days the AMC needs to be active with global trans. Okay. So another thing I want to do real quickly, just so I can show you all. I'm not sure if I showed you the alarm feature. I'm going to type in, oh, my bad. Oh yeah, so with box truck really quickly, I do want to highlight something. Box trucks don't work with lanes, so we won't be able to get an accurate representation of a tri-haul. It still will show us, and I believe it won't be as accurate because they don't work with lanes, meaning that, box truck is regional. It's it's really hard to kind of find loads back and forth through these areas because box truck tends to be, like, for example, here, this one pallet of cheese, that's 100% not going to be brokered to, or sorry, warehouse to warehouse. That is most likely warehouse to small business. And that is kind of what box trucks are, kind of excess loads, or kind of direct to consumer loads. That's why they kind of require that lift gate and pallet jack. So it is harder to find lanes. They don't really exist. But what you do have is regions. So, for example, Chicago, I know that when I'm in Chicago, I'm going to be able to access Ohio. So we will come back to the tri-haul tool and the market conditions tool. Market conditions, because it really focuses on dry van, reefer, and dry van, reefer, and flatbed, and tri-haul because of similar issue. But for example, this is kind of what the tri-haul looks like here. So in an ideal world where there would be kind of these consistent lanes with box trucks, this tri-haul option is saying point A to point B. So Chicago to Cincinnati, you would make 974. But if you took that kind of detour and instead took a load from Chicago to Toledo, and then from Toledo to Cincinnati, you would be able to make $600 more, right? So that's probably more reasonable. Now, again, it's a lot harder on box trucks because box truck loads are more sporadic. They are not lane based. Okay, so I think I just have to show you all now. Oh yeah, now you have that deadhead pops up, right? Oh yeah, 24 foot full, 10 foot full, partial. So that's kind of letting you know the contents of the load. Like I said, just because something is, so this is 10 foot, right, and 2,500 pounds, but it's listed as a full load, right? And just because it's listed as full doesn't mean it's dedicated. So you might still have some room to get another load in there, right? Again, this is listed as partial, but it's refrigerated. It's saying need chilled, freeze, protect. Again, just because it's listed as refrigerated and partial doesn't mean that it is able to be carried with other loads. So keep that in mind. And I do believe that kind of sums up this area. I just want to go back to my loads just so I can show you kind of what marking those as saved or booked or called looks like. And so that is what it does on our end. I like this because it allows me to know if I already called on a load, if maybe I was already turned down or whatever. And then just it allows me to have that all in one space. I like this feature. Again, on the load board, it can get a little convoluted. So it can be a little hard to tell what you already called out on because sometimes these loads will be duplicates and will be posted multiple times. And at least then you're like, oh, okay, they're the same location. I already called on that. Same broker, same location, same price. I already called on that. So that is kind of the breakdown of what the load board would look like. I'll see you in the next video and we'll kind of go more into specifics on tri-haul market conditions and kind of what those lanes look like and comparing markets.
If you're looking for a fuel card, look no further than our partner, A to B. With A to B, you can see average savings of 46 cents and up to $1.85 per gallon. That's not their only perk. A to B's high security provisions help prevent fraud, and their fuel cards report to credit agencies that help you build business credit. If you're ready to sign up, or if you need more information, click on the link tree in the bio and select the A to B fuel card option.
Alrighty, so we're going to go through that market conditions tool that we talked about, which is one of the reasons why I pushed that DAT1 select option. So since you are a newbie, so from here, sorry. Since you are a newbie, you will need as much help as you can get with figuring out what are the best markets. Now, there is also something to keep in mind is it really doesn't matter how long you've been in the industry. That doesn't mean you have like kind of knowledge on every market, right? You start to get familiarized with the markets that you tend to work with. But for example, it's very common to end up with, even as a freight broker or as a dispatcher, whatever role you play, you tend to kind of stick to, for example, if you're a dispatcher, kind of the same loads with the same carriers in the same city, right? And so you're kind of looking for lanes and building those lanes out in cities that you become familiar with. On the flip side, with as a freight broker, you tend to be searching for load, or you tend to be kind of pricing freight, kind of with the same customer, and that becomes routine. So you don't tend to have this large, right, grasp of the entire market. So um, shippers, brokers, and carriers with these tools are able to kind of get an idea of what the market looks like, right? So when a freight broker goes to price their freight, they use a sort of, and let's see if I can pull up here on tools. So this is the one that we will be using, but they tend to use something called a kind of like this quick rate lookup tool. Um, Rate view tool. And so that is kind of for placing a quote. So that allows them to kind of tell a shipper or their potential prospective client, hey, this is how much I need to book that load for with you all. This is how much I need to get so that I can find someone to cover that load. Likewise, a shipper has access to the same kind of page, right? So they can kind of take bids from multiple freight brokerages and even small carriers and kind of get the best rate. So on that side, no one is being had. But yeah, we would select the market conditions option right here, right? We're going to open that up. Sorry. And so you should get kind of this heat map. So the way this heat map works in general is anything that is super blue and on that left side of this kind of color scale is going to be in a loose market. So loose markets don't necessarily mean that they don't pay well, right? But what they mean is that that there's a less probability that you'll be able to negotiate a higher rate because there's a loose capacity, meaning that there are just way too many trucks, kind of supply demand in that area and not enough loads. When you get something like a tight capacity, which would be anything kind of veering towards the bright red, we're talking about areas where there are a lot of loads and not as many trucks. And the funny part about that is, for example, San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, there's a ton of truck drivers into San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston, and yet it's consistently a tight market. Now, something to keep in mind is, yeah, just because something is listed as a tight market, right, doesn't mean that it is necessarily where the best paid loads are. 80% of the time, it will be the truth. But for example, I know for a fact um, Miami outbound for a van is not paying that well. And we can kind of look into that here in a second. Anyways, you do have the option of doing like inbound freight. So inbound will vary very differently from outbound. So this will kind of help you put something together, right? So if I know that loads coming into Dallas and Fort Worth are in a tight market and there's a huge demand for them, that is probably somewhere I want to start researching, right? Similarly with California, over here in the Fresno market, similarly in that Platte market, which is that Nebraska area for that van, and that Atlanta market, right? So there I kind of am like, okay, well, market seems to be paying pretty well. And yeah, that makes sense that this is kind of the Denver area as well. Whereas if I were to switch that over to outbound, right, that map changes, right? And it changes radically. So now we have a neutral capacity out of that area and a very loose capacity where we were in that Platte market, right? And then we have kind of all of that market, Dallas, Houston, come back as well as Miami. So you can change the time frame. So I can do prior 8 days to kind of get an idea what the market was then. It shouldn't change drastically. So as you can tell, it did not change drastically. Miami went down a little bit, but it did not change drastically. Something to keep in mind, right? With these lanes, they change a lot based off of the truck type. So market conditions is built for van, flatbed, and reefer. That doesn't mean that it won't also help you get an idea of what the market looks like in general. I can tell you right now, looking at this market, the van market, it looks very similar to how I would say the box truck market is. So there are similarities in that, for example, in that dry area. So if I were to move to flatbed, right, it changes. So that same outbound freight, well, I'm waiting for it to load, but now we have a lot of tight capacity all over that like southeast kind of Gulf Coast, Gulf of America region, right? So now you have a lot of capacity there saying like, yeah, the market is tight here. And so that kind of tells me I want to start looking at kind of what that market looks like on the outbound side. Because right here I'm on outbound. It looked very different on the other end, right? Colorado is now fully neutral, fully loose. And so is kind of all this kind of North Dakota, South Dakota area. But yeah, there's this big kind of influx in that market, in that flatbed region in Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana.
Guides of Freight has partnered with DAT Loadboard to give all of our viewers 10% off their Loadboard subscription for a year. With this deal, you can see annual savings of up to $474. If you're interested in signing up, you can do so by clicking on the link tree in our channel bio.
Houston. So that's like a visual representation of, yeah, the market can change dramatically, right, based off of which truck type you have. So now I'm going to move it into inbound, right? So inbound is kind of where the loads are coming in that are kind of at the highest capacity. Again, not necessarily representative of the best paid freight, but 8 times out of 10, it is. You just want to research it before you start kind of going happy with with booking freight, right? So, for example, now I can tell, yeah, this market looks way different, right? South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah was not even a tight market for the vans inbound, right? Switching over, and it looks like Florida region as well for flatbed. So switching over, let's open reefer real quickly. Okay, reefer inbound has changed quite a bit. So now this area is a loose market. And it looks like kind of reefer inbound, not so hot of a market. Um, Arizona, Flagstaff area, very tight. So that's kind of where the market is. Boston areas in Charlotte. But now if I switch that over to outbound, right, this is where the capacity is super high. You see Miami, Florida. And that probably is because something is in season, right? So that kind of gives you an idea of how how different not only the market is per truck type, but how different it is in each city and each region. And so this is really a tool that is a great starting spot if you have zero familiarity with um, the freight world in general and building out lanes, like for these reefer, van, and flatbed. Of course, you want to take things for reefer into consideration, like seasonal produce. So, for example, just because the reefer market might be hot in Miami today, right? Maybe it's because there's a lot of produce that is in season, and it doesn't mean that that's a seasonal thing. Doesn't mean that next season it's going to be just as hot. So things to keep into consideration. Um, let's see here. So I'm going to close out this market conditions tool, and then in the next video, I will walk through kind of an example of how different the market is. We'll start off with a couple cities that I spoke about here. So we're going to do Miami. We're going to compare Miami, Florida. We're going to compare Houston, Texas. And then we're going to compare Kansas City, Missouri. Okay. And then we will also compare a few truck types. That way we kind of get everyone in. Like I said, it's virtually impossible to kind of sit here and break down every lane, every market, every kind of best paid freight. Like that is something that you really just figure out. My main goal is to kind of familiarize yourself with the tools that are available on the load board, and also get you thinking about the trucking industry and the trucking world as a sort of market, so that you aren't in this position where you're saying, I bought a truck and there's no freight, right? Because that has happened. Or you buy a truck and there's no freight, or you're trying desperately to find freight for someone that, for example, might live in Montana where there's like no freight, right? They're in a loose market, very loose, right? So the average loads are 250, and maybe they just don't pay well. My whole goal is, how do I get you all thinking in this way? That way, that is how you go about dispatching, because this is the way that brokers and shippers price their freight. So if you're unfamiliar with how the market works, you might just think we're in a horrible market all around, whereas that might not be the same experience for someone else. And then I'll just leave you with a little anecdote, but um, technically we've been in a trucking recession since 2022, 2023. And it's really funny because one of my clients or one of my old clients had called me, and she's like, "Hey, why is Van paying so badly?" And I was like, "Well, it's the trucking recession's been happening for the last 2 years." And she goes, "Yeah, but I've been driving my box truck in the same areas, and my rates haven't dropped at all." And I'm like, "Yeah, just because it dropped for a van or a reefer doesn't mean the box truck world was impacted, right?" And I found that for example, a lot of box trucks haven't even felt the weight of the trucking recession, especially the more established ones that have these kind of broker connections and have MC authorities that have more days. So the idea here with market conditions is having one more tool that will empower you to kind of understand the market a little bit better. That'll empower you to say, let me take a day, let me examine this, and really let me take a look at these lanes. Let me take a look at trying to figure out these regions, kind of figure out how this kind of system, and find the patterns of this system, so I can really start to be not only a good dispatcher, but if you were self dispatching, really start to maximize your profits based off of the markets, right? I it wouldn't be you're not going to have the same experience of kind of in the same kind of income if you're going to consistently low paid markets as you would if you're going to markets that pay well. So starting off here, and then I'm going to move you all to kind of compare and contrast a few a few truck types, as well as how those truck types look in each city, so that you can really gain an understanding of how that works. So I will see you in the next video. Like I said, we're going through Miami, Houston, Kansas City, and I might change those in the next video. I'm actually going to do Miami, Houston, Chicago in the next video. And then we'll go over a few truck types, and we'll go over kind of the size of those trucks and how that impacts as well.
Guide to Freight has partnered with Gulf Coast Bank to provide all of our viewers with a factoring rate of 2% or less. Unlike traditional factoring companies, Gulf Coast is entirely self-funded, meaning that they are able to pass these savings along to their customers. If you're interested in signing up, you can do so by clicking the link tree in our channel bio.
All right, so we're back. So I just kind of want to go over a couple markets and kind of compare for you all to kind of prepare you all for kind of what to expect. So I am going to go over to the search loads, and I want to go over, for example, truck size really quickly. That's where I'd like to start. So I believe I had told you all that I was going to cover Miami, Houston, and Chicago, just kind of as brief samples. And then I will be covering briefly, I'll do box truck, van, and reefer. And then, yeah, box truck, van, and reefer. Let's do flatbed as well. Not going to go too intense on them all, um, but I do kind of want to explain kind of how different these markets can be and kind of get you in that habit of understanding that each market is different and have that really kind of embedded in your brain. Um, Not because it will be impossible for you to figure out the patterns, but so you know that there are patterns that you can be looking for. Now, if you'll recall, vans, flatbeds, and reefers work on lanes, box trucks work on regions. And so I just want to kick this off with market Chicago. That's easier for me since we've already kind of detailed that. And we're going to go back to the reefer example. Sorry, we're going to start off with box truck. It likes it. The reefer box truck example. And I have a lot of people that reach out and ask why they're unable to find loads for 24-foot box trucks or and actually, you know what? Let me knock out the reefer. That's just going to be a little bit more confusing when it comes to finding loads. So there's 23 loads available. Again, it's late night. This is not representative of the Chicago market as a whole, because most loads are usually posted from like 8 a.m. to noon for that next day, and then the rest of the loads for the day that follows are usually posted from noon to 5. So not entirely representative, but I do want to give you all an example. So, for example, 26-foot box truck. So, as we have it now, there are 23 loads for 26 for up to 26-foot box trucks. What happens when we drop down to 24-foot box trucks? Now there's only 10 loads, right, available. Again, so that means that they're between 26 and 24. Yeah, there's about double loads on on the 26-foot box truck side. Now imagine when there are, for example, when it's like 10 a.m. and there's 200 loads listed for 26-foot box trucks out of Chicago, and only 80 of them are for 24 are able to be taken by 24-foot box trucks, right? So in that same kind of respect, oh my god, that's way too high for box truck. Whoops. So in that same kind of regard, right? If I drop this down to from 26 to 18, now there's only 9 loads, right? And the majority of these loads are actually partial. So they're not paying too well, right? Now they're paying 50 cents a mile because they're partial loads, right? And now there's only full loads. So these are the loads, of course, that will pay the best. Now there's only 2 full loads available for 18-foot or 10-foot box trucks. So I tend to get people that'll call me and say, I just bought a 16-foot box truck. It's very important to understand that box trucks are very region based. The market will dictate what you can do, one. And two, 26-foot box trucks are the standard. Anything outside of a 26-foot box truck, you're going to have trouble finding loads for box truck. These box truck loads are built for 26 foot in the same vein as, for example, flatbeds. So let's move to flatbeds really quickly. So, for example, with flatbeds, the average flatbed is 48 feet. So this search is for 53. It's showing 119, but the average flatbed is 48. So most of the loads for flatbed are going to be for 48-foot flatbeds. And you can kind of see how the only difference that made was like about 19. Now, again, it is 10 p.m. So imagine if there's 99 loads available for the coming day and the day after right now, then this is probably a pretty big market in Chicago for flatbeds, right? And you can kind of see how different the rate per mile looks versus the box truck, right? But for example, if I had someone who reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I have a 28-foot flatbed," what does that look like now? 18, right? Now there's only 18 loads available. And then you have this kind of FD, which means flatbed or step deck. And so the rates have now changed as well, right? Rates are significantly lower for these flatbeds now. So that is something to take into consideration, right? The lengths, knowing what the average length for your truck type is. So if I have a box truck and the average length is a 26 foot, I need to make sure that as an owner, I am buying a 26-foot box truck. 24-foot box truck, I know that like this was probably not a good example because you can't really see it as in depth, but about 30% of loads will allow a 24-foot box truck. So you're already not setting yourself up for success, especially a box truck where, the loads may be, depending on your region, few or far between. Either depending on your region, there may be a lot of loads, or they're well-paid loads, and there may not be any loads available. So you don't want to be a 24-foot box truck when you're already in a tight market. In the same regard, that you don't want to be a 26-foot flatbed in an already tight market. Okay, so let's close that out. Now I want to. Okay, let's see. Where were we? So I want to, for a second, I'm going to pull up Miami and I'm going to compare the reefer market in Miami. Um, so reefer again is 53 foot. It can be really anything because you can have loads that are for reefer box truck, in which case you can enter 26-foot reefer. You're not going to have as many loads available, but I do find reefer box trucks are kind of special in that regard. So now let's take a look at the reefer market in Miami. So right off the bat, it's looking pretty good. Florida is usually a pretty not so great market, and anyone will tell you this. But I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at the reefer market in Florida, right? So currently, I'm searching rate, but if rate per mile, right? So yeah, $3 a mile, 259, 235. I mean, these are pretty big rates for Florida. Um, and someone less experienced might have experience with reefer vans and have someone call them that just has a dry van and say, "Yeah, dude, I can get you $3 a mile. I get $3 a mile all the time out of Miami, Florida." Which, by the way, this is mainly due to the seasons, right? And then get that van to sign up with them, or maybe buy a van and then come to this big realization, yeah, that's not paying the same. This isn't $3.40. This is 153 and 179 and 195 and 116. So very different market, Miami, for their reefer versus their van. And a lot of that is because Miami, right, and Florida in general, there's a lot of vegetation. So a lot of things are being grown there. So there are seasons where you'll find kind of these really well paid loads. So, for example, this is mixed produce, right? Food. This is, and doesn't have it listed. Uh, man, man, oh man, I'm trying to show y'all. And you can still negotiate this further, I think, is the other part of that I should have mentioned. But yeah, man. So it's not actually. There's not a lot showing kind of what is being hauled. Okay. Um, I wish the commodities were listed on these, but it's typically going to be that kind of seasonal vegetation, trees, fruits, vegetables coming out of Miami. And you might even get some fish coming out of Miami. And so that market, that $3, 381 a mile, is very different than the van market, right? At one that's topping out at 190, right? And now, if we were to look up, for example, box truck out of Miami, so average is 26, right? And then we'll do max weight on the box truck. Uh-oh, right? There's like no loads for box trucks in Miami. There's one load, it doesn't even have a price listed. So very, very different market. And if we were to do box truck reefer out of Miami, I mean, you're getting a little bit better. I mean, you have more opportunities, and I'll tell you this much: if you have a box truck reefer in Miami, it's better than having a regular box truck, but not by much, right? There might be more opportunities, and I definitely have connections in the Florida area with for reefer box trucks. There are more opportunities, but it doesn't make it an easier, like way easier, right? By any means. So, last but not least, I want to check out the flatbed market in Miami. Right? Um, we're just gonna we're gonna stick to full 48, and then do that, right? And so, yeah, not as strong as the reefer market in Miami, right? So that is something to keep. That is kind of like one of those big examples if you want to keep that in mind. Every truck type can have varying kind of levels of success within a market. So I want to hop over into, let's see, we had talked about, let's hop over into Houston. So Houston, right?
Guide to Freight has partnered with Tula to help you start your business. If you click on the link tree in our channel bio, you can book a free consultation with them and they will help you determine the best business structure for your business. Now let's get back to the video.
Right. So we're searching Houston flatbed full, right? Wow. Okay. So we've got a pretty decent pay, right? We're not too low for Houston. And so kind of kicking off the mile, right? 270, 284, 327. A lot of these are local ish loads, right? So within Texas. Okay. So that might be like, I might think if someone called me and I have to do some more research, but I might be like, okay, well, it looks like flatbed in Texas might be a great DOT only place to haul, right? So I'm going to open vans really quick in Texas, compare that market, how different that is from the flatbed market. It's different, right? We're rate per mile. Of course, this is after hours, but it's different. It's lower. The rate per mile is lower. And then we can go to, for example, reefer. Oh, my bad. That's why that looks so different. Standard van is 53 foot, right? It's still lower. Not not by much. It's not that much lower, but as you can see, more opportunities, right? When we had a 48-foot van or trailer, we didn't have 935 loads listed for 211 to 212. So now we can go over and check reefer, right? Right. So it looks like this market, I might get the impression that it's great all around, right? With the exception that when I looked at flatbed, there's a lot of local loads, whereas the rest of them have different loads. Now, when I type in box truck, and I didn't even adjust the length, but it'll do it for me, right? Because there's no 53-foot box trucks. Yeah, it's different. There's only 3 loads available for box truck in Houston, right? Whereas we were just looking at vans with 900, right, in Houston. Let's see. Vans had, am I tripping? 935 loads, right?
So very different market within Houston for a van, box truck, flatbed, and reefer, right? And so that is kind of where in the box truck I'm telling you that it's so regional. So all of Texas might actually not be so great for a box truck, but maybe up in the Midwest it is. I can tell you for a fact that up in the Midwest it's a lot better, kind of that Chicago, Great Lakes area. But Houston, for example, seems very heavy with these. They have a ton of van loads, right? More loads than we've seen really yet so far. And of course, we are after hours, so just imagine how many loads are going to be available at 8 a.m. tomorrow, right? And they're still posting. It's 10 p.m. and they're posting loads. Um, and then last one I want to check out real quickly is Chicago. So let's check out Chicago and what this market difference kind of looks like, right? So Chicago, wow, 1,000 loads, and I think it's actually telling me that like there are too many results to show, so I have to narrow it down. But out of Chicago, we've got so many loads, right? Um, and then I will go back and compare Houston and Chicago just on lanes really quickly for vans to give you all an idea. But I mean, yeah, loads available. Let's check out reefers. They're paying $3 a mile, and some for some of these loads in Chicago for those vans. Pretty great. Reefer as well. I mean, these are pretty well priced. They're local, right? And of course, it's 10 p.m. Don't double down on that. So we won't really. I can't really give you the exact idea of what that market actually looks like. But I can tell you, wow, 525. I mean, it's local, right? That might give me an idea that, hey, maybe, or local ish, right? Maybe if I live in Chicago, I take a few of those loads a week and don't go too far, right? I've got a reefer. Box truck, highest paid load is like 180, 160, right? And then I think the last one we had to do was flatbeds. Okay, so flatbed, 180 loads listed, $3, $4. Again, a lot of that kind of in the same area. So with flatbeds, van, and reefers, you start to run into kind of these lanes, right? So Crest, Illinois to St. Louis, Missouri, that's a lane. Let's see, destination. And so Chicago to Birmingham, Alabama, another lane. Chicago to this Little Rock region, another lane. Chicago to Phoenix, Arizona, another lane. And typically, these lanes, when it comes to flatbeds, reefers, and vans, will have loads coming back, and so these are kind of consistent lanes. So, lane being there's almost always a load from Joliet to Phoenix, Arizona. I can tell you that there is, and there's almost always a load back from Phoenix, Arizona to Joliet, right? That is kind of that lane. It tends to have this kind of symbiotic relationship when it comes to flatbeds, reefers, and vans. So when I open up right here, I'm going to go back to Houston. Let's get an idea of kind of from Chicago where these connecting sites are. So we can see Alabama, California, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas. There's a lot of Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Minnesota, Missouri, a lot of Missouri, New Hampshire. So just getting an idea of kind of how that market looks like for a Chicago van versus how it would look like. Let's do out of Phoenix. Where are the loads connecting out of Phoenix, right? Compared to Chicago. Do we have as many loads that are going to Alabama and Missouri out of Phoenix? Let's see. The answer is no, right? So what we do end up having is a lot of loads going into California from Phoenix, right? Those lanes tend to be more interconnected. Phoenix, remember, is on almost near the West Coast, so New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California tends to have kind of more loads in that region. There are loads that connect over into Texas, but there tends to be a large concentration in that area. New Mexico, Salt Lake City, Utah, Colorado, and that kind of western
United States, and it's reflected in the loads in these lanes that are created here. So you have Phoenix. A lot of these loads are going to California, right? Cali, 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 Cali. You have Colorado, 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 Florida, Georgia, Georgia, Georgia. You have a few lanes going into Idaho. But I'm willing to bet that every day when I log in, there's going to be loads from Phoenix to California. And so these lanes, when it comes to vans, flatbeds, and reefers, make it predictable for us to kind of figure it out, and maximize our profits. So, for example, for me, right, I'm going to search this rate per mile out of Phoenix, right? Okay, so I'm seeing Phoenix to Idaho Falls being paid pretty well. So again, these lanes are priced using data, right? So if I open this up, yeah, I mean the spot for this is above spot rate, so this is paying super well, and we can see here it's because there's a drop at the shipper, meaning that you have to leave the trailer there, right? But yeah, it looks like 252 kind of spot rate out of Phoenix to Idaho. Again, February 10th, 2025. That matters, right? You have Phoenix to Denver, 295. And I know for a fact this is a really well paid lane consistently out of Phoenix, even in a recession. But, right, something to keep in mind, right? You still want to research what that looks like on the other end. So I might go in and enter Phoenix to Denver, Colorado as my search for my lane, right? Phoenix to Denver. Some of that's good considering not all loads are posted right now. But if I go and reverse this, oh, right? Lane looks way different coming back. That backhaul looks way different. So, also important to kind of research both ends, right? Now, you will start to develop these patterns, right? And kind of figure out which lanes pay well. But the most important thing to remember, right? That pricing data is used for pricing, right? So um, these aren't trivial made up numbers. um, I mean, I guess you could argue that in some sort of philosophical sense, but these aren't arbitrary numbers, right? So that 1600 is using this kind of data tool. The spot market right now is at 128 from Fort Collins to Tulsa in Arizona. So that tells me, yeah, this isn't so great. This isn't such a great paying lane backhaul, right? That is how this is priced, especially with that van reefer flatbed. So I know that I should expect that. Now I can kind of see now, oh, okay, so this is paying more than that spot rate because there's a drop trailer at the receiver that can take up to 2 days, right? Right. And then it says 24/7 receiver can be delivered, right? But there's up to a 48-hour drop trailer. So that means for 2 days, you might not move, right? And they're saying 24 to 48, right? So that means it could be a day, could be 2 days, but most of the times when you want to go with kind of the most extreme of the two. But yeah, so then you can kind of get an idea of what these lanes look like. So for the most part, we can expect Denver or Fort Collins area to kind of that metropolitan area to pay 128 a mile, right? Whereas if I were to flip this, right, and go Phoenix to Denver, I can expect 295 a mile, right? And I can or 295 shipper quoting, but I can kind of expect to kind of try and get some more money out of that, right? And that'll be on a consistent basis. Remember, these numbers do tend to kind of reflect a 30-day pattern. Now, um, you will find that it doesn't like while the rates may drop through these lanes, these are consistently, once you get it down, Phoenix to Denver, that lane has been kind of the most consistently best paid lane coming out of Phoenix, right? And this is me telling you over the last 5 years of me looking at this Loadboard. Now, is it the best lane in general with that kind of a backhaul? Probably not. But these lanes, right, they do tend to stay consistently higher. Another one would be Phoenix to Houston, which has dropped quite a bit. But at a certain point, Phoenix to Houston was a pretty well paid lane, right? And when I say well paid, I'm talking 250, 270, 3. And it's dropped down quite a bit. But something to keep in mind, one, it's still kind of up there, but it will eventually kind of get up there again, right? Houston, Phoenix as well. And it's still kind of one of the better Phoenix lanes for the market as we stand vans in Phoenix, right? And then switching over that Houston and Phoenix, there's a lot of capacity, right? There's a lot of loads back. They're not so greatly paid. So that is something that you would figure out. And maybe, right, if I lived in Phoenix, I might just say, maybe right now is not the best time for me to be driving a van, right? And so maybe I call someone and say, hey, can you kind of figure out what my best lanes are? And they're like, okay, well, let me take a second and kind of look through the best paid lanes. Let's check out this Tolleson and Tacoma, right? Let's check out this Tolleson in California and really kind of help if you're working with a dispatch client, them figure out what those lanes are. Or if you are in a self dispatcher, give yourself a day to really look at this data and kind of figure out kind of where the best markets are. Um, there is this there's this kind of misunderstanding that this market, everyone is suffering the same in the market, and it's not true. And there's also this misunderstanding that the market doesn't fluctuate. I mean, this is trucking. Like every other market, it's going to fluctuate. So you have, for example, the highs of COVID from 2020, right? I mean, 2020 had these artificially inflated prices, but I wouldn't know it if it was my first time driving a van as an owner operator. I would think it was normal to see $4 paying loads, right? Other people in the industry might say, no, dude, I mean, average is 250 per mile. But, I might think it's normal to see $4 mile loads. So that is something to keep in mind, that also the time in which you enter really reflects where the market's at. The market is still in a dip, but it is slowly correcting itself. Um, but it is important to know what that the market is this larger thing, right? You might have some big hangups on the market. So if I'm at, you know, if I enter at a high, right, I need to know that I'm entering at the height of a market, right? That's important. If not, I might just think that, whoa, $4 to 250, what a fall. Where I might have made my kind of investments based on that $4 a mile. I might have started living it up at that $4 a mile instead of saving. I might have bought a trailer that was way too expensive and that was artificially inflated because I thought $4 a mile was the norm because my friend told me that $4 a mile, that the loads were at $4 a mile, and I thought it would stay that way. So it's really important to work um, to really try to understand the market as a dispatcher, as an owner operator. The most important thing is for you to understand the market, and the easiest way to understand the market is to play with these tools and really sit down with these load boards. Um, for example, you could book a one-on-one with me to go over these markets, and I mean it would I could help you out and maybe help you see clearly, but you will find that there's not I don't have more knowledge on these markets at random than you would using these tools. And that is kind of the power of these tools, is to kind of empower you to look, to use these market conditions, to use these kind of spot rate to kind of get an idea that, oh, this is a lane, to know that van, flatbed, and reefer work on lanes, but that box trucks don't. So it's harder to kind of get an idea of, one, where they're going, and two, or where there are frequent deliveries or origins or destinations, but also to kind of get a rough idea of how much kind of the rate fluctuates, because it kind of almost doesn't. So it is really important to learn to play with these tools. Now, um, that kind of brings us to the end of our dispatch training. And I hope that I answered as many questions as I possibly could. I understand that there might be a slight kind of desire for me to go into the markets with more depth. And the truth is, like I said, the best way to learn about these markets is to go into them and really do your research. When I started out, once I saw this pattern, I said to myself, okay, let me sit down and write them out, and let me kind of research the opposite by switching that over. What's going into Phoenix that pays well? Because you can do that as well, right? I mean, I can leave the origin empty and then go into destination, and that can help me figure out where the best paid freight is going into Phoenix if I need a backhaul. And look, it's all California and Nevada, right? Kind of what I was talking about, that kind of general area. And you will find that, for example, things connect. Each origin city has cities that connect to it. Each destination has kind of those consistent areas that it goes to. So it does eventually get easy to recognize these patterns and to start creating these lanes again with these tri hauls and these market conditions. Um, but the most important thing is you don't want to buy a truck buy a truck without knowing if that truck type is good for where you are at or how you like to operate. So, for example, if I don't like driving to California and I live in Phoenix and I don't have a car, but I'm not car compliant, I don't want to get car compliant, or my trailer, my truck isn't, um, wouldn't allow me to get qualified for that, then I'm probably probably shouldn't be driving in general a van in Phoenix, right? Because it looks like that would kind of be my area where I possibly could make some money, right? And it's not going to be a lot by a long shot because these are short runs. So, kind of all of that put together is really really important to understand. And so, with that, I will leave you. Thank you for watching this series. My name is Yad Garcia. This is Guide to Freight, and there is more to come for this channel.
Hi everyone, I hope you're finding this series to be helpful. In the event that you need further assistance, you can book a one-on-one consultation with me by clicking the link tree in the channel bio. You can also visit guidetofreight.com and select the book a consultation option from the menu. I'll let you get back to your video.